The airline bubble has burst, at least in Atlantic Canada. Westjet has cancelled all flights to 4 key Atlantic Canadian cities, reduced flights to others, laid off 100 people. Why? Well, one reason is the unanticipated consequence of the Atlantic bubble, where visitors from outside those provinces have to quarantine for 2 weeks. It's been a big health success, but an economic disaster for the airlines. Should the federal government follow the lead of other countries and bail out the airline industry, even as customers who bought tickets haven't gotten cash refunds? Talk about that and the call for national standards in long-term health care homes. We're joined by the Intergovernmental Affairs Minister, Dominic Leblanc. Minister, hope you and the fam are doing well. Good to have you here. The Prime Minister spoke to ministers for the 21st time on Thursday. A lot of the premiers, especially in Atlantic Canada, want the airline industry bailed out. The National Airlines Council of Canada wants a $7 billion bailout. Is support going to come?
So you're absolutely right. The premiers, Evan, discussed on the call last week the concern about regional air service. The Westjet announcement is obviously difficult for the 4 Atlantic provinces, for Quebec as well. I had a number of conversations with the president of Westjet. There's no doubt that Canadians expect that when the economic recovery is concluded, that we're left with a competitive air transportation system across the country. It's essential for the economy of the country. Our geography requires it. But Canadians also expect us not to simply write blank checks or bail out large corporations without addressing, as you said, the issue of vouchers. As a member of Parliament, I hear from a number of people how upset they were that thousands of dollars on a credit card turned into a voucher that they may or may not be able to use at an unknown time.
The German government bought 20% of Lufthansa. Westjet, of course, is now privatized. There used to be a public company. Is your government open to taking pieces of these companies the way the German government did with their airline?
So that's a good example, Evan. In some jurisdictions, European jurisdictions, that was one approach. I know my colleagues Mark Garneau and Chrystia Freeland are looking at a whole series of options of what government support might look like for the sector. So we haven't made any decisions in that level of detail yet, but they're very much discussing that, I know. And the government is very much discussing that. 7
months in, we're still having conversations. I feel like I'm sitting at an airport waiting for a delayed flight that never is going to come. This is not funny for the economic consequence of this is a big, big deal. You're an Atlantic Canadian, Minister. You're in that sector, right? The situation that you said we can't find ourselves, for Atlantic Canadians, they're in it now. But okay, so I'm intrigued.
But Evan, to be fair, there are not a great number of traveling passengers in Atlantic Canada coming to Atlantic Canada for the reasons you said in your introduction, because the provincial governments, in the case of Atlantic Canada, have put in these very severe and very effective public health measures. So this is by no means one-dimensional, and that's why the government needs to be prudent when we're talking about potentially these significant amounts of money.
Let me talk about a call for national standards for long-term care homes. Second wave. We knew this was coming. There were supposed to be measures to the so-called iron ring around long-term care. Hasn't happened. Long-term care homes are again at the center of this second wave. So now, I appreciate this is a provincial responsibility, sir, but the federal government has been involved to help them. The Army was called in. The Red Cross is now coming to a number of homes in Ontario, which, by the way, as you and I both know, that's a sign of what a failure this has all been. What, in a concrete way, can the government do to set up long-term care home standards? And will that be tied to health transfers? In other words, money will go there if the provinces accept the standards.
So the issue of a discussion in terms of the Canada Health Transfer, the general transfers that take place to provinces and territories for healthcare, is something the Prime Minister is committed to doing, or to having a discussion with the premiers in the coming weeks. So that discussion will take place. The long-term care challenge isn't necessarily part of that precise discussion. It might end up being part of a larger conversation, but what we've said, Evan, is that Canadians were understandably extremely upset by some of the tragic circumstances we saw in different parts of the country, but no part of the country was immune from some difficult circumstances in long-term care homes. We think Canadians expect their governments to work together in something as important as caring for these vulnerable people. So we've said to provinces and territories, and we did last week in a conversation the Prime Minister had, the 20th discussion with other First Ministers, that we wanted to start by, for example, sharing best practices from one jurisdiction to another. What can we learn in the very immediate term? Because as you said, the second wave is upon us, and Canadians expect to not see some of the tragic outcomes that we saw in the spring.
Let me just try to boil it down. Isn't it possible for the federal government just to say, look, we've given you guys $19 billion for the safe restart. Here's what we'll do. There's another X billion dollars we'll give you right now, but it's got to go directly to long-term care homes, to training, because you can't get enough workers there, training, PPE. That money's got to go to long-term care. If you do that, we'll give it to you. If not, no. Why is that so difficult?
It's not difficult, Evan, in the sense that provinces have said to us, and on the discussion on the call last week, a number of provinces said they wanted to work deliberately with the Government of Canada in order to put into place additional measures that would protect these vulnerable people in these long-term care facilities. So, as you correctly noted, the Red Cross, under federal leadership, the Canadian Red Cross is currently in a number of these homes to assist and to bring urgent support when needed. We're happy to continue to offer that urgent support that provinces ask for. It's not a long-term solution. The long-term solution is to say, listen, we've learned some sad lessons from the tragedies of the spring, and what can we do immediately, whether it's, as the Prime Minister noted this week, whether it's increasing the infection control specialist that would be available to work in a particular facility or across a number of facilities to ensure quality control in terms of infection control. These are all things that the Government of Canada is prepared to do with provinces.
I got to leave it there, Minister. I appreciate your time as always. Take good care, Minister Dominic Leblanc. Thanks.